Thank you, Jennifer. So welcome everybody to the IAEM CTC. How's that for acronym hell? So anyway, my name's Steve Newton here. Today's topics, short and sweet, a little bit about swarm technology, how it's being used these days, and a what-if idea for you about how it might be used for some critical decision-making. So, they call me Newt. It's easier to spell than Steve, I guess. I come from a wildfire and emergency management all hazards background, operations side, so the term field dummy absolutely applies to me. I did some volunteer work with our version of the Civil Air Search and Rescue organization in BC, did some time in a volunteer fire department, and just like everybody else that retires in the emergency management game, I hung my consultant shingle up after that. And I just happened to land the most unenviable position in British Columbia last year as the initial recovery manager for the worst flood in BC history. Still traumatized over that one. And because I've got this interest in technology and I've been pursuing it for years, my most latest endeavor has been to start up a small podcast called thesmartEOCpodcast.com, which is a good segue into how I got into this topic. Okay, so first, a bit of a definition that I just threw together about what swarm is related to emergency management. Quite simply, a group of simple agents that leverage their collective behavior within a system or environment to produce a result in support of activities related to mitigation, preparedness, response, or recovery. Seems reasonable, right? Okay, so why is swarm starting to happen? That's a little bit of a different sort of conversation here. So this Web 3.0 or 3.0 kind of thing that's going on, interoperability between systems, there's this huge convergence of a bunch of technologies. You're all familiar with the Internet of Things. Everybody's starting to throw out there the Internet of Everything, IoE. If you haven't heard it, you heard it here first. I'm calling it the Internet of Absolutely Everything. Okay, and it's a very real description. We've got more horsepower coming in smalling packages. Quantum computing's just around the corner. Connectivity everywhere. Like all the cool kids are putting up low Earth orbit satellite constellations for connectivity all over the world. Artificial intelligence is making a big play. Lots of folks here in the room are dabbling in the artificial intelligence game. So this is all coming together. So things like swarm basically are already here. So real quickly, it's in the drone world. I think you all know that. I'm not going to beat this one to death. Volunteer groups forming up all over the place, coming together to help this stuff. They're getting smaller. They're different technologies. The sensors are getting smaller and more powerful, that sort of stuff. You just go Google it and you can find all kinds of stuff. So, yay, that's a mature business practice around emergency management. There's some interesting stuff going on with robots and things called snake bots. So you see the snake bots here, these long cylindrical things. Well, again, sensors are getting smaller. They've actually done some operational testing in Mexico in the last couple of years and probably some other places where they can take this kind of technology and put it into places where you can't get humans or feed cameras very well and that sort of thing. So in my world, I'm thinking infrared sensors, I'm thinking audible sensors to pick up people, maybe Bluetooth to pick up any phone signals that might be in the way there to inform the rescue operations. There's a bunch of interesting stuff going on with robots. MIT's got this thing called a cheetah, and it jumps. So it goes all over. So envision something like that, circumnavigating a big pile of rubble in an earthquake zone or something like that. So these kinds of things are happening out there now. Okay, rapid damage assessment. Well, drones are being used, of course. There's all kinds of software tools on the net or available right now for flight planning and those sorts of things. So smart mission planning is very much today practice. These things are getting smaller, so that's a little robo-bee, as they call it, on somebody's finger. So little tiny things, and they're getting smaller. This particular one here can go underwater and come back up and carry on and do its thing. And again, very, very small. So these are some of the types of technologies that are coming out as well. Autonomous supply chain logistics, big play there. So we obviously know the drone stuff here. We've got driverless trucks, transport trucks already in play, proven. There's jurisdictions that are in policy stages of identifying dedicated lanes on highways and things like that. So we've hit the tipping point on that one already. This is a full-size what they would call a heavy lift helicopter, a K-MAX. So the U.S. Navy has been experimenting with driverless or pilotless full-size helicopters for at least 10 years that I'm aware of. And it works, and there's different kinds of helicopters. So, I mean, here's another example of a drone down in Africa, a group called Zipline. They're flying out over vast, sort of very, very remote areas and dropping life-saving supplies, medicine, that kind of stuff. So all of this stuff is already here as well. So the simple model there that I put to you that's coming to us is that Internet of absolutely everything is collecting data from all the different types of sensors you can possibly imagine, feeding it into some sort of AI-based predictive system or planning system for supply chain, that sort of thing, and autonomously launching the proper configurations of fleets of drones and land-based vehicles and everything else, excavators, bulldozers, you name it, all that stuff is already autonomous and very programmable. 3D printers for housing, okay? I mean, you may have read 3D printers are sort of the next biggest game changer or disruptor, if you will. Okay, well, there's already mobile solutions that exist. So, in my mind, not a big step to take that into the autonomous world and guided by an AI kind of a thing. And you know you hit the big times when you Google something like top 10 house 3D printers and there's something there. Okay, so this stuff's happening already. And costs and speed and all that sort of stuff. So think longer term interim housing sort of thing in large disaster areas is probably that application. But that's not really why I'm here. I just wanted to background you guys a little bit on all that stuff because it'll come into play here at the end. But there's another application of Swarm that you may or may not be familiar with here, and it's this notion of amplified intelligence through a collective of human brains focused in on a topic or looking for a solution or something like that. So that's got my attention. So last week I held a little Swarm Tech exercise. I'm a big fan of a fellow by the name of Dr. Peter Diamandis. Anybody in the room know who he is? Okay, if you get nothing else from this talk other than this, go find that guy's blog and start following it. He's one of the top 50 most influential influencers in the world right now, are considered to be, and he's smart. So anyway, I took this, he had a post on this company called Unanimous.ai, and I looked at that and I said, emergency management. So I reached out to the company. I said, emergency management? Nope, they hadn't even been there yet. They've got a bunch of other applications, but they're very intrigued by this. So we went back and forth for a little over a month, and I managed to convince them to host one of their sessions online, and I'll show you some results in a second. And what we were looking at, or the application at least that I saw, was critical decision making for allocation of scarce resources. Okay, that's a thing in disaster response and recovery and all that sort of thing. So anyway, that was kind of what this was all about. Now, I know there's some statistical nerds in the room here. First thing you're going to say is sample size, statistical significance, and all those kind of dirty words. Okay, well, the big thing about this, and I'm not the technical expert, so I can't explain the neuroscience behind it, but what they claim is the collective of a few brains can be as powerful or more powerful than individual voting or polling or decision-making kind of models. So I pulled this off of their site here. They pulled 283 people, together here. They asked them a series of questions, and this is just a distribution of how people answered correctly. So there are quite a few people, got in call that 82% correct, or down through 70%, 60%, and these few ones probably should go back to school, I'm guessing. Okay, but anyway, this is how the population answered when they were polled individually. Then they were brought into the tool. Collectively, they answered with a 92% correct rate. So there's all kinds of literature on their site, grounded in good science from reputable universities that support that this is also a thing. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, so in case you're thinking it has to be more than 20. Because we pulled together 17 participants. Okay, some of you may have seen the reach I did out here through this group and others. We had some people from different food groups and different types of agencies and organizations come on. I wanted a pretty broad kind of exposure to this. Okay, we presented them with 3 questions. So the background context for questions 1 and 2, and this is a real thing as well. In British Columbia, in the Lower Mainland area, which is City of Vancouver and surrounding municipalities, there's a group called IPREM, the Integrated Partnership for, what have I got on here? Regional Emergency Management, okay? Now, the representatives on the IPREM group are the Chief Administrative Officers or the City Manager, which is basically the same title. Okay, so these are the people that are responsible for running the city and its emergency programs and everything else. Okay, so one of the business practices that they've identified is that when Cascadia hits, game day in Vancouver, and everybody's in having a real bad day, somehow these 23 local governments are going to come together every day and collectively decide to share all of the scarce resources that are coming from all over the world. Okay, so now any of you that have got an operations background will recognize the word resource hoarding. Okay, these people are absolutely responsible for the safety and the well-being of their communities. So I have a problem believing that they're just going to be in a world of hurt and give a whole bunch of assistance to somebody who's in more of a world of hurt when their mayor and elected officials and residents are screaming at them, right? So that's why we chose this scenario. We gave it a big earthquake, and the simple sort of proviso around more resource requests coming in than what available resources are. Okay, we've also got a scheme for decision making in British Columbia. It's enabled in our legislation, and it just simply states safety of responders is always going to be the first priority over anything to get support to. The second one is saving lives, and it works its way down here. And I can tell you from my old duty manager days, when I got that dark 30 phone call, somebody was looking for provincial support, as long as they were able to tie it to one of these things, I could defend the decision. So it's a good system that way. So we also gave this to the folks that participated as one of their sort of parameters. Okay, we gave 4 cities and 2 organizations as the requesters. They were looking for type 2 or medium duty helicopters. Okay, we gave them some mission types. So Vancouver, for example, wanted to transport responders and conduct aerial situational awareness. Burnaby wanted to fly electric crews in to restore power to responder facilities, hospitals, the EOC, that sort of thing. New West wanted helicopters to evacuate elderly and vulnerable populations. North Vancouver wanted responders coming in, casualties going out, because they're very much like Portland. They can become an island under some circumstances. The BC Ambulance Service wanted to transport people out of the hospitals to make room for injured folks coming in. And BC Hydro wanted to go out and inspect their dams to make sure they weren't going to breach and threaten communities and responders. These are all very real situations in the Lower Mainland area under an extreme event. So we gave them those. And so the results for question number 1. Now, these sessions were a maximum of 1 minute. The psychology here used, or the terminology, is based on least preferred or lowest recommendation and not best choice. I can't, again, explain the neuroscience behind that. That's somebody way smarter than me knows this stuff. But the way that they worded it were things like, which request should be the lowest recommendation? I would word it a little bit differently, maybe, when I know more about it. But anyway, this was the tool. So I'll draw your attention to this because I'll play a video of the actual answering. So they've got the 6 choices here. This is a puck that moves in the middle, and what you're going to see is a bunch of magnets. So each magnet represents somebody online. So what I understand the AI does behind the scenes is it tracks where people are pulling towards, what their intentions are, and that sort of stuff. I'll also draw attention to the 60-second timer down here, and watch how quickly some of these results can be produced. Basic premise is the closer you are to the puck, the stronger your pull. So in 32 seconds, the group collectively decided that sending the helicopters to inspect the hydro dams was the bottom of the choice list. Okay? So we then went through a process of elimination using this question. And we got some results, of course. Okay, but and this here is the heat map. That it's one of the products that's produced by the tool. So I'm an image guy, so this makes sense to me, right? You can tell, you can see the hatched line here where the puck went. It followed a pretty straight line, meaning most of these people were in agreement. Okay, there was some pull from these other sources. The other interesting thing that I just realized yesterday when I was looking at this was North Vancouver and BC Ambulance. Nobody was pulling towards that at all, which tells me right now that these are of high interest or priority to people. Okay, so that was kind of cool. So, like I said, we went through, we repeated it. Okay, and the final results. So what happened then after we eliminated some of them? The question changed to what request should be the highest recommendation out of the final two. But now it was things like BC Ambulance Service by a lot or by a little, North Vancouver by a lot or by a little. So you can see where they landed. So the group collectively felt that flying responders into North Vancouver and bringing injured people out was the highest priority. It's a reasonable one. Okay, so here's an example of how this went, and just watch how strong this. Also notice how people are changing their decisions and supporting other decisions, and then off it goes faster. So 22 seconds, decision made, right? So now the group has collectively agreed that North Van should get the 5 scarce helicopters to do what the mission type was described. So that was kind of cool. Another way to display the data, and there's a bunch of others that I can't even understand. That's more of a geek thing than me. But anyway, this is pretty straightforward to me. This tells me that this is the top choice, and this is the bottom choice. And the curious part was the Vancouver New West, almost identical. So they could have gone either way on that one, right? So I'm not going to suggest that this is an absolute final decision, but what a great piece of information to have if you're the person that has to make those final decisions, right? The market insights or the group insights. So we changed question number 2 up a little bit, and we took this over into an interim housing solution. They presented four options here: mass shelter in local schools, gyms, and community halls; tent city in local fields; fleets of modular and recreational vehicles; and then moving impacted residents to other communities in Western Canada. So the results from that one, you could see quite clearly what the most preferred option was: modular homes and RVs, and the least preferred option, tent cities here at the end, right? So this is the list that showed up according to the bar charts as well, right? So modular homes and RVs, yay. Moving people to other cities, not on. That's what they didn't want to do, and that's pretty consistent with my experience in evacuations over the years. Okay, so for number 3, we changed it up a little bit more, and we put it into a bit of a budget constraint kind of a groove here. So the big bad mean city manager said, cut. So the emergency program came up with 5 options. First one was, and these are purely fictitious, of course, the lease on the current EOC expires and there's no extension possible. So the new EOC building being built is put on hold, and a temporary facility has to be sourced and outfitted. The second one was no new fleet vehicles for 3 years, extra costs around maintenance, leasing additional vehicles for surge, that sort of stuff. Number 3 was no new hires into existing or forecast job vacancies. And the impacts of that, of course, extra overtime, more sick leave, possibly stress leave, those sorts of things. Number 4, no developmental training, just mandatory training only to meet regulatory requirements for staff. And then number 5 was no travel, all travel cut. That's mission critical. So we put that out to them, and here's where we landed it up. So basically, what is the most preferred option, meaning which budget cut do you guys want to most take? And you can see it was almost unanimous. We don't want any new vehicles. The one that they wanted to maintain the most was making sure that all the new hires were coming into place. And if you think about it, that kind of probably reflects a lot of the decisions that most of us would make in this situation. So that was kind of interesting. But here's another interesting piece. We had one question, and this clearly revealed that the wording of the question is absolutely critical, because the question was which option should be the lowest recommendation, and that was misinterpreted 2 ways. So it was interpreted by some to mean we don't want it, and some to mean that we do actually want it, right? So I'm going to show you the puck and how this one went. Notice the hatched line. It's like some drunk walking home from an IAM session after hours or something like that, right? Okay. or being carried home by a group. How about that? Okay, so here's how this one went. And the confusion points you'll see were these two. There we go. You see a number of folks that are sort of now going over to the no new fleet vehicle side of things. And you'll notice that one went the full minute. So the group really didn't have a good consensus on that one. And when we debriefed them, it came back down to they misinterpreted that. So that's absolutely critical in this stuff. So some of the feedback and observations, well, within about 10 minutes, I got an email back with this comment at the top from a fellow who's a 40-year man in wildfire operations and one of our top Type 1 incident commanders. He said, "Thanks for inviting me. This has real promise, much better than conference calls trying to make a decision." I thought, right you are, Tim. I'll buy you a beer for that. Okay. We made the observation that this is not a voting system, that it augments the decision making. So again, the unanimous AI folks have got some literature to explain that piece. I can't really explain the science behind it. It was obvious that we needed really good situational awareness. You know, we proved out what we wanted to do in a bit of an exercise test environment, but good SA, absolutely critical if you're going to make decisions with a tool like this. How the questions are structured was important, and who participates. So I mentioned at the outset, we had 17 people from a bunch of different organizations and agencies. I know how some of these people answered because I know how they think, and I've worked with a number of them. So if I were to have just a group of city managers, their thinking would be different than the incident commanders from site. Okay, they're just wired differently. Oh, sorry. Okay, so anyway, so that sort of came out. I think, or at least what's got my attention here is this potentially has some good ability to provide insights for sort of decision making around prioritization schemes. But I also think there's an opportunity to use it to engage the communities themselves that have been impacted. You know, let them tell you what they think they want versus you give them what you think they need. So maybe there's something to that. And here I'll leave you with a what if scenario. So what if some of this wireless mesh technology, all this communication stuff, and the Internet of absolutely everything is feeding data into some sort of AI predictive or prioritization or planning system? Autonomous swarms are being self-deployed based on what this is spitting out. You know, all the robots and snake bots and drones and robo-bees are out there doing their thing. Vehicles for supply chain are automatically delivering the supplies that are needed to where they're needed. The swarm tech here is used for some of the decision making around prioritization, stakeholder and resident input, but also could be used for long-term recovery planning as well. So those are some of the initial thoughts that I had about it. So if you want more information, like I said, I'm not the technical person. Go to the unanimous.ai site. They've got a white paper there. They've got a number of references to scientific papers. And it's just kind of interesting stuff to me. And that is all I've got. If you want to pursue this any further, there's my email, my phone. I will be interviewing these folks for my podcast at some point in December, so it'll be published sometime after that. That's it. Thank you very much, everyone.